You ever notice how two people can make the exact same amount of money, like down to the dollar, and yet one of them somehow ends up with savings, investments, maybe even a side hustle that's quietly growing, while the other one is constantly stressed, living paycheck to paycheck, wondering where all the money went? It's weird, right? Because we've been told our whole lives that income is the thing. Get a raise, get a promotion, get a better job, and everything will be fine. But then you look around and you see people making 60,000 a year who seem completely fine, calm, building something real, and people making 120 who are perpetually broke, constantly anxious, always one unexpected expense away from panic. My name is Adam, and I spend way too much time thinking about money, financial psychology, and why some people seem to effortlessly build wealth while others stay stuck in the same patterns for decades. And honestly, this whole thing, the income paradox, I guess you could call it, it's one of the most fascinating puzzles I've ever tried to understand, because it's not about math, or at least not just about math. It's about behavior, identity, invisible beliefs we carry around without even realizing it. And here's what I figured out. The difference between someone who builds wealth and someone who stays broke on the same income isn't discipline. It's not willpower. It's not even financial literacy, really, though that helps. It's something deeper. It's about the stories we tell ourselves, the identity we've built around money, and a handful of tiny, almost invisible decisions that compound over time into completely different lives. So if you've ever felt like you should be doing better financially, like you make decent money but somehow it never feels like enough, like you're working hard but not getting ahead, this might actually change how you see the whole thing. Not in some rah-rah motivational way, just a shift in perspective that makes everything else make sense. Let's get into it.
All right, so here's the first big thing. Lifestyle inflation is real, but it's not what you think. Most people know about lifestyle creep, right? You get a raise, you spend more. You make more money, your expenses go up. But here's the thing. It's not just about buying fancier stuff. It's way more subtle than that. I had a friend, let's call him Jason. Jason got a promotion about 3 years ago. Decent bump, maybe 15,000 more a year. Not life-changing money, but real money. And Jason's a smart guy. He didn't go out and buy a sports car or anything crazy. He just adjusted. He moved to a slightly nicer apartment, nothing insane, just, a better neighborhood, a little more space. Then he started ordering delivery more often because, honestly, he was working harder and felt like he deserved it. Picked up a gym membership at a nicer place. Upgraded his phone plan. Started going out to drinks more because, well, he could afford it now. None of these things individually were reckless. They all made sense. They were all like reasonable adult decisions. But here's what happened. Within 6 months, Jason was in the exact same financial position he'd been in before the race. Same stress level, same lack of savings, same paycheck to paycheck feeling. Because lifestyle inflation isn't really about the stuff, it's about the identity shift. Jason started seeing himself as someone who made more money. And unconsciously, he started living like someone who made more money. Not in a flashy way, in 1,000 tiny invisible ways. Meanwhile, I know someone else, let's call her Maria, who got a similar raise around the same time. And Maria did something different. She kept her expenses almost exactly the same. Didn't deprive herself, didn't become some weird minimalist hermit or anything. She just didn't adjust. She automated the extra money into savings and investments before she could even think about it. And here's the crazy part. She didn't feel like she was sacrificing anything because she never upgraded her mental baseline. Same income increase, completely different outcomes. And this is where it gets interesting because the person who stays broke isn't dumb. They're not bad with money in some moral sense. They just have a different relationship with income. They see money coming in as permission to spend. The person who gets rich sees money coming in as an opportunity to build. It's a subtle difference, but it's everything. The invisible expense problem. Okay, here's another thing that drives me crazy. Invisible expenses. And I don't mean like hidden fees or whatever. I mean expenses that are so normalized, so woven into our daily routine that we don't even see them anymore. They're just part of life. Subscriptions are the obvious one, right? Everyone knows about subscription creep by now. Netflix, Spotify, that meditation app you use twice, the food delivery service, the gaming thing, the cloud storage, the productivity app you swore would change your life. But it's not just subscriptions, it's convenience. It's the coffee on the way to work because you didn't have time to make it at home. It's the lunch out because meal prep feels like too much work. It's the Uber because parking is annoying. It's the little stuff that feels too small to matter. And here's the thing. Individually, none of it matters. $5 for coffee? Who cares? $12 for lunch? It's lunch. You gotta eat. $15 for an Uber? It's convenient. It saves time. Time is money, right? But when you add it all up, and most people never actually add it all up, it's not small. It's hundreds of dollars a month, sometimes over 1,000. And the person who stays broke doesn't see it because they're looking at each transaction individually. The person who gets rich sees the pattern. They see the system. I'm not saying you should never buy coffee or take an Uber. I'm not one of those people who's like, skip the latte and you'll be a millionaire. That's nonsense. But there's a difference between choosing to spend money on something you value and unconsciously bleeding money on things you don't even notice. The person who gets rich makes intentional decisions. The person who stays broke operates on autopilot. And honestly, I think this is where a lot of financial advice goes wrong, because we focus on the math. Here's how much you're spending on coffee. And we miss the deeper thing, which is awareness. It's not about deprivation. It's about actually knowing where your money goes and deciding if that aligns with what you want.
The savings identity crisis. Here's something I've noticed. Most people who struggle financially don't see themselves as savers, like it's not part of their identity. They might want to save, they might know they should save, but deep down they don't see themselves as the kind of person who has savings. And this matters more than any budget or spreadsheet because identity drives behavior. If you don't see yourself as someone who saves, you won't save. Or you'll save for a little while and then something will happen. Car repair, medical bill, just life. And you'll dip into it and think, see, I knew I couldn't do this. The person who gets rich on the same income has built an identity around being someone who saves, not in a self-righteous way, not in a look at me, I'm so responsible way. They just see themselves differently. I think this happens early, honestly. Somewhere along the way, we internalize messages about money. Maybe your family was always stressed about money, so you learn that money is scarce and slips away. Maybe you grew up around people who spent freely, so you learned that money is meant to be enjoyed. Maybe you got messages that saving was for other people, richer people, smarter people, people with their lives together. And those messages become your operating system. They run in the background, making decisions for you without you even realizing it. Breaking out of that isn't about willpower, it's about rewriting the story. And that starts with small proof points, saving $50, then $100, then $1,000, building evidence that you are, actually, the kind of person who can do this. Because once you start seeing yourself as someone who saves, someone who invests, someone who builds wealth, the behavior follows naturally. It stops feeling like discipline and starts feeling like just who you are. The delayed gratification gap. All right, let's talk about delayed gratification for a second, because I think we misunderstand it. We talk about it like it's a personality trait, like some people are just born patient and some people aren't. But I don't think that's right. I think it's more about belief. The person who stays broke doesn't struggle with delayed gratification because they lack discipline. They struggle with it because they don't really believe the future will be better. Somewhere deep down, there's this sense that saving for tomorrow doesn't make sense because tomorrow is uncertain and today is hard. And honestly, I get it. If you've never seen money grow, if you've never experienced the compound effect of small, consistent actions, why would you believe in it? It's abstract, it's theoretical. Spending money now is concrete, it's real, it feels good immediately. The person who gets rich has usually had some experience, even a small one, where they delayed gratification and it paid off. Maybe they saved for something and bought it in cash and felt amazing. Maybe they invested a little bit and watched it grow and thought, oh, this actually works. And that experience creates belief, and belief makes delayed gratification easier. Not because they're more disciplined, but because they trust the process.
This is why I think one of the most important things you can do financially is create small wins. Don't start by trying to save $10,000. Start by saving 500. Experience what it feels like to have a little buffer, to not panic when something breaks, to have options. Because once you feel it, once you experience the peace that comes with a little bit of financial breathing room, you'll want more of it. And that wanting is way more powerful than any amount of guilt or shame or should.
The investment mindset versus the expense mindset. Here's another big one. The person who gets rich sees money differently, like fundamentally differently. The person who stays broke sees money as something you earn and spend. It comes in, it goes out. That's a cycle. You work, you get paid, you pay your bills, you buy what you need, you enjoy life a little, and then you do it again next month. The person who gets rich sees money as a tool, as something that can work for you. They see earning as just the first step. Then they're saving, investing, growing. Money isn't just for spending, it's for building. And this changes everything, because once you see money as a tool, you start asking different questions. Not just, can I afford this, but is this the best use of this money? Not just, do I have enough to cover my bills, but how can I make my money work harder? I'll give you an example. Two people get a tax refund, let's say $2,000. Person A sees it as free money, extra money, money they didn't have before, so they spend it. Maybe they buy something they've been wanting. Maybe they take a trip. Maybe they just absorb it into their regular spending and it kind of disappears. Person B sees it as an opportunity. They think, okay, what can I do with this that will improve my situation long term? Maybe they pay down high interest debt. Maybe they put it in an index fund. Maybe they use it to buy something that'll actually save them money over time, like decent cookware so they eat out less, or a good pair of work shoes that'll last years. Same amount of money, completely different frameworks. And again, I'm not saying person A is wrong or bad, I'm saying they have a different operating system. And if you want different results, you gotta update the operating system. The social pressure trap. Let's be real for a second. Social pressure is huge. We don't talk about this enough, but so much of our spending is driven by the need to keep up, to fit in, to not feel left out. And it's not always obvious. It's not like you're consciously trying to impress people. It's more subtle than that. Your friends want to go out for dinner. It's expensive, but you don't want to be the person who always says no. Your coworkers are talking about their weekend plans, their vacations, their new whatever. You feel this low-level pressure to keep pace. And social media makes it so much worse because you're not just comparing yourself to your immediate circle anymore. You're comparing yourself to everyone, to influencers, to old classmates, to strangers living highlight reels. The person who stays broke often can't resist this pressure, not because they're weak, but because belonging feels more important than saving. And that makes sense, right? We're social creatures. We're wired for connection. The idea of being left out, of being seen as the broke friend, feels terrible. The person who gets rich has usually figured out how to either find a different social circle or just care less. And I know that sounds harsh, but it's true. They've made peace with the fact that their financial goals are more important than keeping up appearances. They've found friends who aren't constantly spending, or they've gotten comfortable saying, nah, I'm gonna skip this one, without feeling bad about it. This is hard. I'm not going to pretend it's easy, but it's necessary. You can't build wealth while trying to look wealthy. Those are incompatible goals.
The emergency fund versus the emergency mindset. Here's something that doesn't get talked about enough. The emergency fund isn't just about money. It's about how you relate to uncertainty. The person who stays broke lives in a state of constant low-level financial anxiety because they don't have a buffer. So every unexpected expense, car repair, medical bill, broken appliance, feels like a crisis. It triggers panic. It derails everything. And when you're in that state, you make bad decisions. You put things on credit cards, you take out loans, you defer the problem and make it worse. The person who gets rich has built a buffer, even if it's small, even if it's just $1,000. And that buffer completely changes the psychology. Because now, Unexpected expenses aren't emergencies. They're just expenses. Annoying, sure, but manageable. And that calm, that sense of, I can handle this, it compounds. Because when you're not in panic mode, you think more clearly. You make better decisions. You don't get stuck in expensive cycles. I think this is one of the most important things you can do if you're trying to change your financial situation. Build a small emergency fund. Not retirement savings, not investments, just a basic buffer between you and chaos. Because once you have that, everything else gets easier. You can think long term. You can take small risks. You can actually build something instead of just surviving. The compound effect nobody believes in. All right, last big thing. Compound interest. Everyone knows about compound interest. You've heard it a million times. It's the eighth wonder of the world, blah, blah, blah. But here's the problem. Nobody really believes it because it's so slow at first, like painfully slow. You save $100 a month, and at the end of the year, you've got $1,200, maybe a little more with interest. Cool, but it doesn't feel life-changing. It doesn't feel wealth. So the person who stays broke gives up. They think, what's the point? I'm not going to get rich saving $100 a month. And they're right, in a sense. Not in a year, not in 5 years, maybe. But the person who gets rich understands that compounding isn't about the first year. It's about year 10, year 20. It's about the fact that small, consistent actions over time create results that seem impossible at the beginning. And the crazy thing is, the math works the same for everyone. It doesn't care about your background or your degree or your starting point. It just cares about consistency and time. But you have to believe in it. You have to trust the process even when it feels like nothing's happening. And that's hard. That's maybe the hardest part. Because we live in a world of instant gratification. We're used to seeing results immediately. And wealth building just doesn't work that way. But if you can push through that, if you can stay consistent even when it feels pointless, the results are real. They're undeniable. And honestly, that's the biggest difference I see. The person who stays broke wants results now. The person who gets rich is willing to play the long game. Bringing it all together. So here's what I've learned. The difference between getting rich and staying broke on the same income isn't about one thing. It's not discipline. It's not knowledge. It's not luck. It's a whole constellation of beliefs, behaviors, and tiny decisions that add up over time. It's seeing money as a tool, not just a resource to spend. It's building an identity as someone who saves, someone who invests, someone who thinks long term. It's resisting lifestyle inflation, not through deprivation, but through intentionality. It's creating a buffer so you're not constantly in crisis mode. It's believing in delayed gratification because you've experienced it working. It's caring less about what other people think and more about your own financial peace. And it's trusting the compound effect, even when it feels slow. None of this is glamorous. None of it is a hack or a shortcut. It's just different operating principles, a different way of relating to money. And the beautiful thing is, you can change this. You're not stuck. Your past doesn't determine your future. You can decide right now, today, to start operating differently, to start seeing yourself differently. You don't have to overhaul your entire life. You don't have to become some extreme frugal weirdo. You just have to make a few small shifts. Automate some savings. Track your spending for a month. Build a tiny emergency fund. Choose one invisible expense to eliminate. Small stuff. Boring stuff, honestly. But that boring stuff, over time, it changes everything. Because wealth isn't built in dramatic moments. It's built in the quiet, consistent, unglamorous decisions you make when nobody's watching. It's built in the choice to save instead of spend, to invest instead of consume, to think long-term instead of just getting through the month. And if you can do that, if you can shift your operating system, rewrite your money story, build a new identity around financial stability, you won't just get rich, you'll get free. Free from the stress, free from the anxiety, free from the constant worry about money. And that freedom, That's worth more than any amount in your bank account. So yeah, same income, completely different outcomes. Not because of luck, not because of talent, because of choice. And that choice is yours.